What is up, listeners, and welcome back to Slide Into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, a.k.a. Schlide, and bowl season has been pretty eventful for college football, especially this, Christmas break time where, some people are maybe taking a break from watching college football or just college sports or sports really in general, and it's been quite entertaining, to say the least. There's been quite a few fights for some of these bowls, and some of these bowl records also at this point in the season are quite surprising, especially in comparison to last year, and we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to look ahead into college basketball this week because last week I already made my college football playoff predictions in the previous broadcast. And, if you want to hear those, you can go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, or Patreon. Search up Slide Into Sports, and you'll find the previous broadcasts there. If you want to hear my college football playoff predictions for the quarterfinal round. But there was also, we can't really recap too much of what was going on in college basketball because there was no college basketball played December 24th or on Christmas the 25th. And there wasn't really any consequential matchups that occurred last week, but there is a few that are going to be happening this week that we are going to talk about as well. So let's just jump right on into this right now. So we're about probably 3/4 to 2/3 of the way done with bowl season, and the outcomes of some of these games have been quite intriguing, to say the least. You look at the Cure Bowl, for example. I don't know if we talked about that too much last week because, it did happen before last week's broadcast, but it was Old Dominion versus South Florida, and I think a lot of people were expecting South Florida to win pretty handily in this game and didn't really think too much of Old Dominion, but Old Dominion won that game 24-10. It was a pretty dominant defensive performance by Old Dominion, and a lot of people, especially when people saw Old Dominion on Indiana's schedule at the beginning of the year in week 1 and were clowning Indiana for, scheduling easy out-of-conference opponents, and, that the Old Dominion game seems to just age better and better as the year goes along. Old Dominion, they're now 10-3. They're 10-3 on the year, and one of their only losses is to the number 1 team. That's pretty impressive for a Group of 5 school, especially one that was not ranked at any point this year. So good for Old Dominion. Good for Old Dominion. Then we've got Kennesaw State, Western Michigan, and I'm bringing this one up because Kennesaw State was in contention for a conference championship. They actually they won against Jacksonville State in their conference championship game, and what ended up happening in the Western Michigan versus Kennesaw State game, it was quite the opposite of what happened with their season. So Western Michigan, I don't even want to say beat because that seems a little generous, but Western Michigan destroyed Kennesaw State 41-6. They put up 27 points in the first quarter. That's right. You heard that correct. Not first half, but first quarter of the game. And, just absolutely incredible. Just touchdown on the first drive. Then you get a touchdown again on Kennesaw State's drive when Kennesaw State's quarterback Odom steps back to pass. He got sacked at the Kennesaw State 47, for -4 yards and fumbled, and that was forced by McGraw, and it was recovered by Fisher at the Kennesaw State 47, and that led to a touchdown. And then Lowry completed a pass on, I believe it was Western Michigan's second drive, and it was a 4-yard touchdown pass. And then with about little more than 2.5 minutes left to go in the first quarter, another 3-yard touchdown pass completed by Lowry to complete the 27-point lead. And yes, I know the math doesn't entirely math up. It's because they missed the extra point. So, yeah, that's why it's 27 instead of 28 in the first quarter. But, I mean, being up, and Western Michigan also scored an additional touchdown in the second quarter and then entering halftime with a 34-0 lead. I mean, that is just crazy to me to do that to a conference champion, at least, for Kennesaw State. I mean, both these schools are at the G5 level, and that's also something that I want to talk about a little bit on this week's broadcast as well. Just the perception of G5 and the way people have been talking about it has got me a little confused. Well, not really confused, but just, I guess, confused as to where people are coming from when they're talking about the G5 schools. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. But speaking of G5 versus Power 4 schools, Memphis and NC State, they competed in the Gasparilla Bowl. NC State won 31-7. Now, NC State, the past few years, has been kind of living in 7-6 and 8-5 seasons. They've been kind of living in mediocrity when it comes to football. And a lot of that has to do with their coach. Their coach, I don't know what it is, but he loses games that he shouldn't lose and then wins games that he, sometimes isn't supposed to win. And then it's a bit crazy. I mean, it's kind of like the Louisville head coach a little bit, but it is what it is. I mean, they got the win, 31-7, and Memphis was one of those teams where, they looked at, people had this perception of Memphis at the beginning of the year when Memphis beat Arkansas, and Arkansas had one of the best offenses in the country. So people, I think, had a lot of respect for Memphis a little bit because of that win. I mean, obviously Arkansas being an SEC school, a lot of people were intrigued by the win. But, at the end of the year, Memphis didn't really, I guess, bring it back together. They just couldn't finish the year strong. And, now going into this bowl game, Memphis is losing their head coach. Their head coach is, well, ironically, going to Arkansas. So, yeah, that was Memphis, NC State. There's also Toledo versus Louisville. Now, this one almost ended with a fight. There's fights breaking out within the final 2 minutes of the game. Final 2 minutes left in the game. Louisville did end up winning this game. They won 27-22. It was a pretty dry first 3 quarters of the game. Toledo put up 3 in the first quarter. Louisville put up 7 in the first quarter. Louisville put up another 7 in the third quarter. And both teams decided to light it up in the fourth quarter, with Toledo putting up 19 points in the fourth quarter and Louisville putting up 13. Toledo, they just decided, you know what, we're going to crawl our way back, and that is it. But, yeah, it was pretty crazy game, especially with the fights breaking out. And it was kind of started when one of the Louisville, I believe it was one of the running backs, he ran out of bounds on the Toledo sideline and knocked over a few players and then some of the Toledo players, they got mad, and then a fight broke out on their sideline, like right before the 2-minute timeout, I believe is when it was. But yeah, I mean, these bowl games, I mean, there's some passion in these bowl games, to say the least. This one in the Boca Raton Bowl. All right, so speaking of fights in bowl games, there was also the California versus Hawaii bowl game. That one in Honolulu, Hawaii, obviously, because it is the Hawaii Bowl. Cal started off pretty strong. They had a 3-touchdown lead in the first half, and Hawaii was crawling their way back a little bit. They put up 10 points at the end of the first half, and then they tied the game in the beginning of the fourth quarter. They put up a field goal in the third quarter, about 2/3 of the way through the third quarter, and put up a touchdown at the beginning of the fourth quarter, making the score 21-21. And then Cal puts up a field goal to take the lead, and then Hawaii answers right back with a touchdown, giving Hawaii their first lead of the game. And then Cal answered with a touchdown of their own, and then Hawaii came back with 10 seconds left in the game for the game-sealing touchdown. Weaver completed a pass to Senecal for 22 yards, and Hawaii won the Hawaii Bowl 35-31. And there were some fights breaking out after that final play. It was pretty electric. I mean, I don't think I've really seen Hawaii win like big games, like big bowl games, but Hawaii, they've had some pretty interesting wins, or at least one interesting win that caught my eye earlier this year. And it was against a Power 4 opponent. It was towards the beginning of the year. It was against Stanford. They won 23-20 against Stanford. And Hawaii, they ended up finishing 5-3 in the Mountain West, 9-4 on the year in the regular season. They only lost one game at home. Like, Hawaii had a pretty solid season, to say the least. I mean, they finished in the top 6 of their conference, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see what the Mountain West looks like next year, considering the fact that a lot of those teams are moving over to the Pac-12. But, good for Hawaii, like, to end on that note. That was great on their part. New Mexico, Minnesota in the Rate Bowl. This one was interesting because Minnesota had to take New Mexico to overtime, which was unexpected, to say the least. But what ended up happening was in the first overtime, the game was tied 14-14 with New Mexico scoring a touchdown with 13 minutes and 18 seconds left in the fourth quarter. And Minnesota and New Mexico just were kind of in a bit of a stalemate after that. No one really had an answer for anyone except on defense. But in the first overtime, New Mexico, they scored a field goal. It was 36 yards, making the score 17-14. And then Minnesota answered with a 12-yard passing touchdown. And they did have to review it for, like, just to make sure it was a completed pass, of course. But Minnesota ended up winning this one 20-17. And they did not do the extra point. That's why it's 20-17. Also, just for extra clarification. But, I mean, a lot of people were kind of dogging UCLA for losing to this New Mexico team. And New Mexico is one of those teams where they were on top, really, of the Mountain West. Like, they were arguably robbed of a Mountain West Conference Championship game. But instead, they found themselves in the Rate Bowl playing Minnesota in Phoenix, which, I mean, that's not that far of a drive for New Mexico, so that was kind of good for them, I suppose. But, Minnesota, they ended up coming with the win. And yeah, I mean, like I said before, people were giving UCLA a lot of flack, but that's because they played at the beginning of the year. And, it's so easy to give teams crap about playing certain teams at the beginning of the year when, maybe they aren't ranked, or maybe they're not a Power 4 opponent or whatever. But, sometimes those teams, they can jump into the rankings, they can have great seasons, but you just don't know until the end of the year. You know what I mean? Like, you can't see the future. Like, people were saying, oh, haha, UCLA, they lost to New Mexico. They got blown out by New Mexico 35-10. Ha ha ha. But New Mexico, they almost made it to a Mountain West Conference Championship game. They should have, arguably, but it ended up being UNLV and Boise State due to tiebreakers. There was like a 4 or 5-way tie, I think it was. So they it was a whole mess. But people were giving UCLA crap for getting blown out by this New Mexico team, and this New Mexico team was clearly somewhat good. I mean, they put up 17 points against Michigan. They didn't get blown out too badly by Michigan in the first game of the year. It really, New Mexico this year was really not that bad of a football team and should have arguably beaten Minnesota in that game. All right, now for a surprising outcome, one that you don't really see too often, but East Carolina beat Pittsburgh in the Military Bowl. And this, I really surprised by this because Pitt at one point was ranked. They were in contention for an ACC title, and their offense was starting to get really hot to the middle and end of the year, and they end up going to the Military Bowl, which was in Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium in Annapolis, and they ended up losing the game, which is kind of surprising because East Carolina, they ended up finishing 5th in the American Athletic Conference Championship, or American Conference, not Conference Championship, but Conference, right behind South Florida, just ahead of Memphis. 9-4 in the regular season. I mean, really, overall, didn't have that bad of a year, but still shocked that they beat this Pitt team. And, this isn't the only shocking outcome that happened, this past week with bowl games, but it was a shock because I thought this Pitt team was, better than what they played in that game. But, that's why we play the games on the field and not live in hypothetical land. But, yeah. Moving on to the Pinstripe Bowl. This one was kind of similar to one of the previous games that I talked a little bit about earlier, the Louisville-Toledo game, where it was a pretty dry first 3 quarters. The score at half for this game was 6-3 Penn State. It was super low scoring, and neither team was really doing anything on offense at the beginning. And this one was also kind of shocking because, I thought Clemson going into this game was in a little bit of a better situation. They have Dabo. Cade Klubnik was starting that game. They didn't really have too many opt-outs. And Penn State, they're going through a coaching transition. They've still got Terry Smith there, but obviously this was his last game. He's still going to be on the staff, but he's not going to be head coach anymore. That's going to go to Matt Campbell. But Penn State winning 22-10 against Clemson was surprising. I thought that game would have been a little bit closer. And, a lot of people really looking at this game at the beginning of the year, like if you had told someone at the beginning of this year that Penn State and Clemson would be playing in December, they'd probably be thinking that it's a playoff game. Maybe second round, maybe it's first round, but they'd be thinking that it's a playoff game. But in reality, they ended up playing in the Pinstripe Bowl in Yankee Stadium. So, again, just goes to show you don't know what could happen in college football. Really, anything can happen in college football. But Penn State, they ended up putting pedal to the metal in the fourth quarter. They put up 16 points. Clemson, I mean, they did answer after Penn State's first touchdown. They put up 7 points, but it was just not enough to come back and get the win. So, yeah, I mean, Penn State, they put up just about 400 yards. They put up 397 total yards. I think Grunkmeyer, he put up a pretty decent performance individually. Like at the quarterback position, he was 23 for 34, threw for 262 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's pretty solid. And he's had a pretty great year considering the fact that he was the backup to Drew Aller and got thrown into the quarterback position, like the starting role, because Drew Aller had a season-ending injury, and then that same week, James Franklin got fired. So Grunkmeyer was working with essentially a new head coach and kind of new coaching staff, or at least, different coaching culture and philosophy. And he ended the year, and him and Penn State, really, they ended the year in a pretty solid way after losing to Indiana at home November 8th. I mean, they blew out Michigan State 20-10. They killed Nebraska 37-10. Then they beat Rutgers 40-36. And then, of course, the Pinstripe Bowl that we're talking about right now, 22-10 against Clemson. I mean, just a great 4-game stretch to end the year for Penn State. And, coming out with the winning season after everything that team has gone through, I mean, is impressive to me. I mean, that's really impressive. They could have easily just rolled over and just not played, whether that be in the Pinstripe Bowl or just the season as a whole. They could have easily entered the transfer portal. Like, there's a lot of things that those guys could have done to not play for Penn State. And that's not what they did. They did not roll over. They just kept fighting. And you know what? Props to them. Props to them. All right, the next game we've got that was surprising is the Fenway Bowl, UConn versus Army. And this one was a blowout. Army won 41-16. And, I mean, it was a pretty back-and-forth battle in the beginning. In the first half, UConn and Army trade off touchdowns in the first quarter. Army puts up a touchdown in the second quarter. UConn puts up a field goal. And Army ends up putting up 2 touchdowns with one of the extra points missing. So we've got another situation where it's 27-10. And then fourth quarter, Army puts up another touchdown, making it 34-10. UConn answers with a touchdown, making it 16-34. And then Army answers again with another touchdown, 41-16. And Army put up 476 total yards against this UConn team. And I mean, this UConn team, they're independent, but they really didn't have that bad of a year. I mean, you can't really compare them to teams within their conference because, independent. But, I mean, they finished the year 9-4, which, I mean, typically you don't really see that from UConn. But, just a bad way for them to end the year, I guess, losing 41-16. But I will say one of the funny parts about this game was actually the end of this game when the Army coach ran just about a mile to avoid getting grass clippings dumped on him from his team, he's just running up and down the field. His players are just running behind him with these Gatorade buckets, and they finally, they had to trip him up and then dump it in order to actually, dump the Gatorade on top of him. It was pretty funny to watch, but just great win and great finish for Army. They end up finishing with the winning season as well with a 7-6 record, but great way for Army to finish the year after a somewhat down year for them. Then we've got the People's Bowl, the People's Nationals Championship, the PopTart Bowl, Georgia Tech, BYU, which it should have been BYU Notre Dame, but Notre Dame opted out, so that's their fault. They missed out on the People's Nationals Championship. So, sucks to suck, Notre Dame. But anyways, it was a very close game. I will say the lead up to this game was pretty funny with Brent Key and just the whole interview questions with the Pop-Tarts and asking the coaches about the flavors. Seitaki talking about how he's eating 2 flavors of Pop-Tarts at once, kind of creating combo flavors, and talking about how the way people look at him because of that. I just thought that was funny. I just think the Pop-Tart Bowl is probably the most fun non-playoff bowl game in college football. And some people are saying that it should be a playoff game. I don't necessarily think that it should be a playoff game. I kind of like it as not a playoff game. It's almost a reward for being just outside of the playoffs, in a sense. Normally the Pop-Tart Bowl is a game. You look at last year, it was Miami versus Iowa State. That was a very, 2 teams that were very close in seeding. I believe it was 13 and 15 or something like that. I believe that's what they were seeded. But yeah, it still ended up being a great game. Georgia Tech, they had control for a decent amount of the game. They went up 21-10 at halftime, and it looked like Georgia Tech was taking care of business. It looked like they were going to come away with the win against BYU, but then BYU put up 14 unanswered points in the fourth quarter and sealed the deal with 2 minutes left in the game. They ended up winning 25-21, and it ended up being sealed with, kind of like with the Texas A&M Miami game, it ended up being sealed with a game-losing interception or game-winning interception, depending on the perspective that you're looking at it from. If you're looking at it from BYU's perspective, it was the game-winning interception, and Georgia Tech, obviously, the game-losing interception. But, it was a great game. It was a very well-fought game. It was also entertaining just because, Seitaki and Key are 2 coaches that I highly respect in the college football game, just in the college football sphere. I think they both are really, really good guys, and they've been doing a great job at their respective programs. But what a way to end the year, for both those teams, just getting to the Pop-Tart Bowl. A lot of people maybe are like, oh, they just made it to the Pop-Tart Bowl. But the Pop-Tart Bowl has been gaining popularity outside of the playoffs, a lot of popularity, each year, because Pop-Tarts just pull something out of their hat to, keep it interesting. Whether it be the helmets or whether it be the players and teams choosing Pop-Tarts to sacrifice and eat at the end of the game. Either way, very interesting. Then there was the New Mexico Bowl, North Texas versus San Diego State. North Texas, they, in a way got robbed. Some people would say they got robbed in their conference championship game. San Diego State another team that got robbed of going to their conference championship game, kind of like New Mexico. A lot of people saying it should have been San Diego State versus New Mexico, but obviously that ended up not being the case. But that's what ended up happening. And these two teams meet in a battle for redemption for themselves. And North Texas, they ended up coming out with the win in this one. It was a very, very high-scoring affair, 49-47. North Texas, and I was watching this game while I was working on something, but every time I would look at the screen, the score was different. Every single time I looked at the screen, the score was different. North Texas, they put up a touchdown first. San Diego State, they answered back with the touchdown of their own. Then North Texas put up 2 touchdowns to end the first quarter. San Diego State answered with the touchdown at the very start of the second quarter. North Texas puts up a touchdown right after. San Diego State closes the half with a touchdown of their own. The score being 20-20 North Texas. Then in the third quarter, North Texas puts up 2 touchdowns, making the score 42-20. And at that point, it looked like the game was pretty much over. But then then San Diego State puts up 2 touchdowns of their own, making the score 34-42 at the start of the fourth quarter. Then North Texas answers with a touchdown of their own, making it 49-34. And then San Diego State tries to close the gap with a little less than 5 minutes left. They put up a touchdown with 4 minutes, 39 seconds left, making the score 49-40. And then with 1 second left, San Diego State puts up a touchdown, making the score 47-49. And both these teams put up more than 500 yards of total yards against each other, more than 200 total yards of passing against each other, but put up more than 300 yards of rushing yards against each other. Just an absolute offensive dogfight for both of these teams, and North Texas ended up coming out on top. And I think that's a great way for North Texas to end their season. With their quarterback entering the transfer portal, with their head coach going over to Oklahoma State to take that job, losing out on those guys, and ending the year with the win is great for North Texas. Is really great for North Texas. And speaking of teams, that is great for winning, or at least, is feeling great about winning. Virginia beat Missouri in the Gator Bowl 13-7. And this one was a little bit controversial at the end because Missouri was very close to scoring the game-winning touchdown to make it 14-13. But their starting quarterback, Matt Zollers, he took what the officials called a hard hit, to where he had to be taken out of the game in order to, because of possible concussion protocol. Or not possible concussion protocol, but because of a possible concussion. So their backup quarterback, their backup to their backup, had to go in because Bo Perbula entered the transfer portal. He was already in the portal, so he wasn't playing in this game. So Matt Zollers was the starter for this one, and then he goes out, and then they literally only had one option for quarterback. And yeah, so that ended up costing Missouri, and the pass led to a interception in the end zone, and yeah, that was it. No points were scored in the fourth quarter because of that, but yeah, Missouri started off strong early. They were up 7-0. Then Virginia, they put up 3 points, or field goal, in the second quarter. So kind of a, not a very high-scoring game. But then Virginia, they put up a touchdown, making the score 10-7, and then put up another field goal, making it 13-7 at the end of the third quarter. And Missouri, they got outpassed by Virginia 198 to 101 in yards. Missouri, they had 159 rushing yards to Virginia's 110. And, I mean, if anything, that just shows that Virginia was able to lock down Ahmad Hardy pretty decently. I mean, he had 15 carries for 89 yards. I mean, considering that people were wanting Hardy for Heisman at one point this year, it's not that great of a performance for him in this game, especially considering he was the main piece or the main player for this game, arguably. But Virginia, they get the win, making Virginia 11-3 on the year. And, they got themselves redemption for losing the ACC title to Duke. And finally, the last game we have is LSU versus Houston. Now, this one, pretty funny outcome, 38-35. Houston won. And, I mean, this game was in Houston. It was in Houston. I mean, it was the Texas Bowl, but it was in NRG Stadium in Houston. Like, it was basically a home game for Houston. And, obviously LSU, they're going through, like, a coaching change with Lane Kiffin. And, I mean, when I did look at the game, they were interviewing Lane Kiffin. I'm like, why are you guys interviewing Lane Kiffin? He has nothing to do with the outcome of this game right now. Or at least, he's not on the field. He's not coaching that team. Like, why are we interviewing Lane Kiffin? Why? But, oh well, it is what it is. But LSU, they had a pretty strong start early. They went up 14-0 within 5 minutes of the first quarter. Houston answered with a touchdown about halfway through the first quarter, and then put up 2 touchdowns in the second quarter to take the lead 21-14. LSU, they scored a touchdown about a third of the way through the third quarter, tying it up. Houston answered with a touchdown with a third left in the third quarter, with making the score 28-21. And then LSU, they answered with the touchdown at the beginning of the fourth quarter, making it 28-28. Houston puts up a field goal with 7 minutes, 42 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and then puts up a touchdown with 2 minutes, 23 seconds left in the fourth quarter, making the score 38-28. And then LSU puts up a touchdown with a minute 15 left, making the score 35-38, but just didn't do enough on the back end to prevent Houston from winning this game. And a lot of people at the beginning of the year, I mean, including myself, were talking a lot about this LSU defense and how great the LSU defense was. And Houston put up 437 total yards on this LSU defense. And this game really makes me wonder, when are we going to put the whole conference supremacy debate to bed? When are we going to put it to bed? Because it's pretty clear now that it doesn't really matter what conference you're in. As long as you have NIL and as long as you can pay players and have a consistent culture, that's what it takes to win now. It doesn't matter if you have a specific conference's patch on your left shoulder, on your uniform. All that matters is, can you win your games? That is what matters. Can you win your games? Do you have a positive culture for your team? Do you have money to pay players? Like, that's what matters. And, Houston ended up beating LSU. And a lot of people have been preaching about how LSU has all these NIL resources and they can do this and they can do that. Well, with the Lane Kiffin hiring, now LSU is paying 3 coaches. 3 coaches. They're still paying for Coach O's buyout. They now have Brian Kelly's buyout to worry about. And now they have to pay Lane Kiffin. So LSU, like, financially, I don't know how you're going to do it. I really don't. But before we preview some of these upcoming bowl games and a couple of these upcoming basketball games that are coming up towards the end of the week, I have a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. Okay, so for these last few bowl games, there's some pretty consequential games here. I mean, I briefly talked about them a little bit a couple of broadcasts ago, but we're going to talk about them a little bit here. We've got the Music City Bowl, Tennessee versus Illinois. These two teams around the same in standing within their conferences. And both, they don't really have great wins on their schedule, but both have pretty talented rosters. So this game, that'll be pretty interesting. It's going to be December 30th at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. There's also the ReliaQuest Bowl, Iowa versus Vandy. I've already talked about my feelings for that game a couple of broadcasts ago about how I want Iowa to absolutely destroy Vanderbilt for what they said about Heisman Mendoza. How dare Pavia speak ill on Heisman Mendoza? But yeah, I do want Iowa to beat Vandy. I do. Then there's Arizona State Duke in the Sun Bowl, Big 12 versus ACC. Then there's the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, which is almost on the same level as the PopTart Bowl, but not quite there. But it will be a very interesting game, though. It's Michigan versus Texas. Now, Michigan, obviously, they went through this crazy coaching change, but they got Kyle Whittingham out of retirement. He resigned from coaching at Utah a couple of weeks ago. Michigan, obviously, they had that whole thing go down with Sharon Moore, and they were desperate to find a new coach. And they ended up hiring Kyle Whittingham, and he coached at Utah for 21 years. He's a proven head coach, and it's pretty amazing that Michigan was able to get him. I mean, that's like an A-plus coaching hire for Michigan at the end of the coaching carousel. I mean, that's amazing that they were able to pull that off. But I think this game should be pretty interesting, and whether or not Whittingham is going to be coaching in this game, I think will be quite interesting, to say the least. But yeah, then there's Arizona SMU. I think that one will be pretty interesting. That one's the Holiday Bowl, January 2nd. And that's the last really big non-playoff bowl game that I think we're really going to see. So moving on now, we're going to move on to the conference records for bowl games. And like I said at the beginning, quite intriguing records that we're looking at here. So we've got the American Athletic Conference with a 4-3 record in bowl games. The ACC with a 5-3 record in bowl games. I mean, considering the fact they went 1-11 last year in bowl games is a huge improvement, especially with how everyone, including myself, was dogging on the ACC pretty much the entire year. Big 12 is 2-0 right now in bowl games. Big 10 is 5-0. Conference USA is 3-3. Independents are 0-1, and they will remain 0-1 because Notre Dame is not playing in a bowl game. The MAC is 2-3. Mountain West is 2-5. Pac-12 is 1-0. SEC is 2-4. Now, really, the SEC is 1-3 because one of their wins and one of their losses is from a playoff game that they played against each other. But for the sake of, counting all the wins and counting all the losses, we're going to make it 2-4. And the Sun Belt is also 2-4. Now, a lot of people, and I know because this is what always happens every single year. Everyone's going to look at this and they're going to be like, oh, is the SEC really that tough? They went 2-4 at this point in the bowl season. Or if the SEC loses their remaining bowl games, people are going to be like, oh, the SEC went 2-8 or whatever. And again, like I said before, it really doesn't matter what conference you're in. And I've said this for the playoffs, but it really, you can translate this to the bowl games as well. But it does matter who you match up against in these bowl games, because that one team that you're playing, that out-of-conference opponent that you're playing, could have the perfect scheme to counter your offense on defense. You just don't know what team you're really going to get in bowl season. And that's why some of these records are just so wild to look at. So again, I think some of you guys maybe thought that I was going to be taking a crap on the SEC, which it is pretty bad that they're 2-4 right now. I'm not gonna deny that, but I'm not necessarily gonna be like, haha, SEC sucks. No. They have 11 teams that are playing in bowl games, and that's a lot of teams that are playing in bowl games. And there was a lot of opt-outs this bowl season as well. So, I think this bowl season almost has an asterisk on it, but it is what it is. It is what it is. These teams, all they can do is just win the games in front of them. Obviously, you look at these records and can compare, conference to conference, who stands up against who. But yeah, I wouldn't really look too deep into this, but I just wanted to bring this up because, everyone was taking a crap on the ACC for only winning one bowl game. And now, this whole year, everyone's been talking about how Texas should have been in the playoffs because they're out of conference schedule, whatever. And now the SEC only has 2 wins in bowl games. And Texas has been talking about how tough the SEC schedule is. So it's a little contradicting. I'm just pointing out the irony and, how the point that was made and the results on the field are kind of opposing each other. But yeah, I like to look at those things. I think those things are interesting to look at, and that's how you poke holes in narratives that people have. Okay, so closing out the broadcast, we're going to look at a couple of these basketball games that we have coming up this week. We've got a couple of big ones. We've got the number 24 USC Trojans traveling to number 2 Michigan. And I think this one should be quite interesting because Michigan, they've been hanging out at the top, in the top 5 for a while now. USC, they've had to really work their way into the top 25. They pretty recently entered the top 25 too. So I think it will be a very interesting game. You look at the total, the points per game, Michigan at 95.4. USC isn't that far behind at 89.4. And points against, USC 75.3, Michigan 66.1. Both are around the same in field goal percentage so far this year. USC at 49%, Michigan at 53. Michigan leads in rebounds, assists. USC does have the slight edge in blocks, and Michigan has the slight edge in steals. But for the most part, these teams are pretty on par with each other, despite USC being ranked all the way down at 24th and Michigan all the way up at 2. So I think this game should be pretty close. And USC, they only have one loss, and that loss is to Washington, which I don't really know why, because Washington is not all that good. They're 6-3. Like, Washington is 6-3, and USC basically gave this game to Washington about 2/3 of the way. Yeah, like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the second half. USC was dominating this game for a large part of the game. So, sometimes, teams have bad games, and that's the way it goes. But USC only has an 8% chance to win this game, which, again, like I said before, comparing the stats and the way the teams are built, kind of shocked that USC only has an 8% chance to win, but Michigan has just been very, very dominant on their run this year. In the first game of the year, this Michigan team put up 121 points up against Oakland in their first game on the road. I don't think, that offensive score is like something you'd see in the NBA. That's incredibly impressive for Michigan to do that. And not only that, but so far this year, they've had 6 games where they put up 100 or more points. And those teams include ranked teams. There was Auburn, number 21 Auburn. They won 102-72. And then they go up against Gonzaga in their next game and beat them 101-61. And then a couple games later, they play Maryland, in conference opponent, 101-83. Those are not easy teams to put up 100 points against. And they held those 3 teams to 85 points or less. And Maryland put up 83, but Auburn and Gonzaga, Auburn put up 72, Gonzaga only put up 61. It was dominance by Michigan. Just complete dominance by Michigan. And you could make an argument that Dusty May is the Curt Cignetti of college basketball, because what he's been able to do at Michigan, granted, it is still pretty early in the year. Michigan still has a lot of basketball left to play on their schedule, but what he's been able to do in the short time that he's been at Michigan is incredible. It's just absolutely incredible. Okay, so now that I'm done with glazing Michigan there, we've got another big Big Ten matchup. Number 9, Michigan State going to number 13, Nebraska. And Nebraska, they've been building some momentum this year. This game, a little bit more of a closer matchup predictor. Nebraska is actually favored in this game, according to ESPN Analytics. Nebraska has a 56.3% chance to win versus Michigan State's 43.7% chance to win. And both these teams have had a also pretty dominant, non-conference performance. And both of these teams also stack up very, very evenly in stats. Besides the blocks, Michigan State is way ahead on blocks. They've got 5.3 blocks on average. Nebraska's averaging 2.6 blocks. Pretty big discrepancy there. But otherwise, both these teams line up very evenly. And Nebraska, Michigan State, they pretty much always start off in the preseason top 25, but Nebraska has worked their way up into the top 25. Nebraska is actually first in the Big Ten standings right now because they're 12-0. Michigan State, they took an L to Duke earlier this month. That was very, right at the beginning. It was December 6th. They lost 66-60. But they've been fairly dominant otherwise. They did have a close game with Oakland, though, in one of their more recent games, which maybe that's why Nebraska is favored in this game. But, yeah, I think I do like the way Nebraska has been this year. Very intrigued by how they've climbed up, essentially, in the rankings. But, yeah, just, wow. This is going to be an amazing matchup to watch. I can't even tell you who's going to win because, obviously, Michigan State, they've got Coach Izzo. If you've got him, anything is possible with that Michigan team or Michigan State team. But Nebraska, they've just been impressive all year long this year. They're undefeated. They're undefeated. Their best win is against number 13 Illinois, 83-80. Okay? And yeah, they're out of conference, or some of their biggest out of conference opponents included Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Kansas State. Those are not easy teams to play. And Nebraska also dominated Wisconsin 90-60 on December 10th. Just wow. But Michigan State starts a relatively tough 4-game slate for Nebraska. They've got Michigan State, then Ohio State, where they travel to Ohio State. Then they travel to Bloomington, and then they play Oregon. And Oregon is, they haven't really been that great this year, but they do have a solid coaching staff. So it's hard to, count Oregon out of this game. All right, in the final game, which I'll touch upon really quick because we're running out of time, we've got Georgia versus Auburn. Now, I think this one is kind of interesting just because, Georgia didn't start off in the top 25 by any means, but they climbed their way up. Auburn kind of climbing in an opposite direction right now. They have 4 losses to great teams that they've played. The 4 losses that they have are in the top 10. That's kind of crazy. But Georgia, they've been kind of quietly climbing up the rankings, and they're actually favored against this Auburn team, which is kind of amazing to me because Auburn was getting a lot of positive talk going into this year. There's a lot of positive narrative surrounding this Auburn team, despite, their head coach retiring and his son taking over. So I think that game will be pretty interesting. It's a SEC versus SEC in-conference battle that is going to happen, and Georgia is also hosting this game. So I think it will prove to be a very interesting game to watch, I think. And I think this game will have some kind of, almost playoff implications. And maybe that's too early to say that, but you look at some teams they kind of like Auburn, they drop some that they maybe didn't want to drop. Maybe they go on a little bit of a slump and then they get really hot towards the end of the year, but it's just not enough. Why? Because of maybe one game that they lost. So, yeah, with that, that's all we got time for today. If you want to listen to previous broadcasts, like I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, I do post the broadcasts on Patreon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube. And I do also post other content on Patreon as well. I post some hot takes there every week, sometimes more than once a week. But yeah, this is the last broadcast of 2025, and I'm excited for the first broadcast of 2026 next week. And with that, Slide out.